Hello, everybody. Glad you could join us for episode number 52 of the Launch and Beyond podcast, a podcast designed to support you in not only achieving great success in your business, but in all areas of life as well. One of the most common things we find, particularly as leaders start to ascend in their work roles and grow in their businesses, is there are so many more expectations and responsibilities of them and of their time. There may be a greater number of people to report to them, have more time-sensitive challenges they have to honour, and they have to be dealing with projects where the stakes are much higher than they previously were dealing with. And it's not unusual to talk to people in such situations that are in total overwhelm, stretched and challenged to find both the time and energy to do it all. Buying into the notion that the only way to keep moving forward is to do more, not aware that the pathway forward may actually be to do less. In this week's episode titled Give Up to Go Up, we discuss the realisations many great leaders get to in order to not only move forward and have a greater impact, but to also preserve their health and well-being along the way. We hope you enjoy it. All right, good morning, Adam. We are super excited for this podcast episode recording. It's about looking at giving up to go up. So very excited to talk about this topic, and it's a really important topic for a couple of reasons. Number one is overwhelm, which I mentioned in the initial introduction, is one of the most common things you find in high-performing people. We've got competing priorities, we've got 10,000 things to do, and it's natural to go, holy smoke, what am I doing? How am I going to do it all? And how am I going to do it in all that time?
Yeah, everyone's problem is the most important problem in the room.
Yeah.
So there's always that competition, and then, then all of a sudden, you're not doing my problem, I'm not doing your problem, then there's overwhelm everywhere, and there's stress, and it's, it becomes too much. When I first read the topic, it reminded me of Eric Thomas. He's got one of the sayings that you've got to be willing at any time to give up who you are for who you want to become.
Yeah, exactly.
And he uses the example of mobile phones.
Yeah.
Would you be able to give up your mobile phone for 6 months to reach your goal?
Yeah.
And the second I read that, it just took me back to that speech that I saw, and I'm like, this is what I got to do.
So overwhelm is a really massive component and product, and we've got some processes and strategy which we'll discuss, which will help along the way. But the second thing that's really important specifically as a topic and why we're covering today is that unless you get to the point where you can give up, there are going to be sort of holdbacks or a stifling your progress, because you're only going to be limited by what you physically can do. And if you just keep piling on extra things to do, then you'll get to the point, you'll get to your own capacity constraint. You're going to basically get to as far as you can possibly go and not necessarily fulfill your highest potential. And number three, there's a finite amount of time and focus for all of us. And unless you are able to delegate, unless you're actually able to find ways of seeking support and recruiting people who help you along the way, you're never going to be able to leverage and scale both your time and your impact. So 3 key areas why giving up certain things may be the pathway to help you move forward and help you go up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like decluttering or this minimalist movement. This is just in your workload rather than in physical objects. The less, we spoke about it last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, how highly successful people have less objects or something. Yeah. And that's because they declutter their life. And that means they declutter their work schedule, which means they've got less overwhelm because there's less physical things around them to clutter them in, and they don't feel that constraint. They can move forward with a clearer mind. So this is just talking about the mental aspect of the physical that we mentioned last time.
Yeah. And we're going to go through some things that you may need to let go of if you aspire to keep moving forward. We've got a list of 10 of them, which we refer back to our show notes for anybody who wants to have a written record of what we discussed today, so you can actually listen and then come back to it if you want to. They're going to all be up there for you. Adam, would you like to let everybody know where they could do that?
Yeah, it's on www.launchandbeyond.com, and at the top tab there's show notes. Right. So we've got them all in order. They're all up there. You can download them anytime. They're in PDF form. So yeah, great. Go for it.
Right. So you can refer to them as we go through this list of tenets. And some of the things that we're going to cover, some of them, like you just said, some of them are behavioral things and some of them are physical things. So some of the people go, okay, man, you had me, I was okay, I was on board, but when you got to this one, I'm out. But that will show you You're going to bump up against yourself, and you're going to bump up against the part of you that is the part that is the biggest thing that you need to overcome or let go of in order to keep moving forward.
Better not have alcohol in this list.
I don't think there was there. However,
point 11.
Actually, basically, I'm just going to say a caveat. There could be somewhere in there that's the case, right?
All right.
You'll see where that comes up very, very shortly. But there's no judgment or agenda other than helping you to be the best version of yourself, right? So let's kick off. And point number one of some of the things you may need to let go of is certainty. And by certainty, we're not talking about certainty in the tangible things that are important, but certainty in terms of the unknown. So there are no guarantees in life, and it's important to be able to lean into uncertainty in order to move forward. Otherwise, you're stuck in the sameness. And it's actually really interesting. There's an illusion of safety and certainty. We believe you see that a lot in people, and specifically, the context of our podcast is about business and entrepreneurship. So built in and inherent in that, there's a risk, right, of things not working out, things changing, economy, etc. So there's risks in there. So the perceived safety of a role and a job is an illusion, because at any one time that job can be gone. And so certainty and feeling that everything is the way it is, it'll always be that same way, and just being stuck by that quite often can constrain you to where you are and prevent you from progressing to the next level.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And last night I was out with my girlfriend and her colleagues, and they're in Melbourne City Council, and they organised the Moomba Festival. Yeah. And I'm like, how's just doing small talk, how's Moomba coming along? And they were just like, we just don't know. We don't know. There's some stuff I can't talk about, but they're just like, we don't know the allowances of people that are there, that we don't know if we're going to go ahead. We're waiting on Australian Open. If they get the green light, then we get the green light. And then there's all this stuff. And it's just been so tough and uncertain. And I go, and then he mentioned to me, he was like, but you're a business owner, you know all about that. I'm like, yeah, I embrace the uncertainty, because especially with 2020, we had no clue what was going to happen. We had to be really adaptive and move forward, and we didn't have to overthink anything anymore. We couldn't overthink. We couldn't plan 6 to 12 months. We just had to deal with what was happening today. And I think that was a great lesson for a lot of business owners. Some really suffered, which was sad. But the ones that did survive, they've learned how to adapt very fast.
Yeah. And there's a big distinction between calculated risk and recklessness.
Yeah.
And so there's a big distinction. You mitigate your risks, and you make sure that you take all the necessary steps to prevent and downplay the level of risk or exposure. But even with all that, there is still always going to be a chasm that you have to go through or jump through.
Yeah.
And in order for you to progress moving forward. And that's what we mean by leaning into the uncertainty. And there are no guarantees every time. It's not always like that. So unless you're able to really embrace and own that will potentially hold you back. Okay.
Yeah.
So if point number one is certainty, point number two, Adam, is ignoring of your emotions. And what we mean by that is, our emotions are regulators and pointers of really where we're at. And a lot of the time, if you're experiencing fear, anger, uncertainty, and you don't have a mechanism by which to regulate those, they'll control you. And so if you don't have a way of being able to work with those, to own those emotions, to name them and take appropriate action, suddenly you're going to be bound by what that does for you.
Yeah.
And so really, this is the whole movement of emotional intelligence and emotional regulations. I'll say that again. Emotional intelligence and emotional regulation that all great leaders have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one to sort of grasp, because you can't sort of learn that in school, or it's something that you've got to just sit down and be inside of you and be reflective. And that's where journaling helps. What happened today? How did that make me feel? How could I change it in the future? And then at least you're getting out onto a physical piece of paper, so then you can read back and go, last time this happened, how did I react? do I want that result again, or do I want to change it? And that's where experience comes in. But you've got to be sitting there and being reflective and being really present with yourself. It's going to school and doing the bookwork can help you in theory, but until you put that seriously in practice, you don't know how to react. Anger management classes are good until something pisses you off,
Yeah.
and then you got to learn how to just regulate yourself.
Yeah, this was one of the biggest areas that I needed to work on and had to work on in my own world because, as an ambitious, abrasive young man that was like bullet a gate at everything and, heart on the sleeve, and that is great up until the point where it's not great. And so there were specific things that it prevented me from doing. It specifically set things up where I was reactive, and so consequently I had to spend a lot of energy cleaning stuff up afterwards. And so to me, being able to regulate the emotions and not buy into all of it and allow it to cycle through and use things like journaling and meditation, which you talked about, were fantastic because it ensured that I had not control, but I had oversight, and I could work with those emotions so much more effectively. So I wasn't acting from fear. I wasn't acting from anger. I wasn't acting from ego. I was acknowledging those emotions were there, let them cycle through, and then try to get to a grounded place where I could make good decisions from.
Yeah, it's funny. Something you just said just triggered me, and it was like, this is why I'm so fortunate that I had martial arts in my life from 10 or 11 years old, because when you're doing live sparring, especially as a kid, you understand the difference between being an aggressor, being defensive, being a counter striker, being an anticipator. But those are all transferable skills in life. If I want to be an aggressor, you get met pretty hard at being an aggressor. The defense just lifts and you start getting hit quite hard. I used to like being a counter or an anticipator. So counter striker is when someone throws the first, you deflect it and hit back. So it's like you're waiting for the thing to happen, and then you acknowledge it's happened, and then you move forward with your better stroke. An anticipator is sort of trying to see into the future and seeing, did their shoulder drop a little bit? Has their hand clenched a little bit more? And that's how you notice what the attack's going to be, and then you can choose your defense. But those are the two forms that I used to really enjoy. But coming with brute force was never met really well because you're almost using emotion to come out. And as you say, with fear and anger, if you're trying to strike someone with real emotion, you're almost opening yourself up to be like one lane and one dimensional. And I've taken that into street fighting as well, because I've fought for so long in the training dojo that when I go to the street, I have no emotion. Yeah, I get pissed off. Why do you want to fight me? That's the first thing. But at the same time, I've been here a million times. I'm not stressed. I'm not angry. I'm not in fear. There's always some element of fear in a live fight, but it's almost a point of comfort going, hey, this is not too bad. And it's very transferable. I think that's why, and martial arts has a discipline and all that sort of. I'm blessed that I got to do that sort of stuff growing up.
It's funny you say that. Like, I went to training last night, jiu-jitsu, and it's like a Saturday morning where we're recording now. Friday night fun times is kind of like Fight Club. And so I was in an 8-minute round yesterday, and 7.5 of those minutes I was in a crap position.
Yeah.
Someone just actually just was in a power position. And so you're right. I really focused. They were trying to extract every last morsel of air out of my lungs while trying to choke me out. And I'd made one, I was a little bit slow in the first 30 seconds, and they capitalized on that. And so for the next 7 minutes, I was basically trying to preserve that situation, but not trying to, like you said, get angry, not trying to abuse brute force, just trying to regulate the emotions, slow down my heart rate to turn it around to end up submitting this guy in the last 20 seconds of the round. And it really taught me that whole process of emotional regulation. No matter what's going on, you could be getting beaten down on. It's about not allowing the situation to get worse by virtue of your emotions, by virtue of your reactions. And so how do you stabilize it? How do you basically go into damage control? And then what do you start doing in a strategic way to move forward? And it was a I didn't even think about it until you mentioned the martial arts component and how applicable it is to all areas of your world.
Yeah, it is. And we notice, especially in jiu-jitsu, as a white belt, where you have a higher level of fear when you've got purple belts or blue belts on top of you coming down, and then you get in a situation, and then you just do some crazy explosive thing to get out of it, and then one of the two eventually end up injured because you're so explosive. It's actually physically detrimental to you or your partner, and then people don't want to train with you anymore because you're just too explosive and full of emotion. So as you said, moving up and, you being a higher rank, you learn just to calm down.
Yeah.
And you can see that at the high level guys, they're just calm.
One of the biggest things that I've learned there for sure. So they're 2 points, Adam, that we've covered: certainty and ignoring your emotions. The third thing that we want to talk about that is important is not hiding your head in the sand, right? Quite often known as the ostrich syndrome. A lot of the times when people feel overwhelmed, overloaded, they try and hide. They put their head in the sand and maybe it will all go away. And the really important thing is, if you are going to move up, you need to start taking ownership and responsibility and not putting your head in the sand. And you've got to give up that scared part of you that just wants to hide and run. It's a case of looking at it, leaning into those fears, those doubts, those uncertainties, take ownership, responsibility, and just take one step in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, you taught me this when we were coaching. It was like, just have the hard conversation. And most of the time, being business related, it's always a query of, if you can't pay your customer, what do you do? Your supplier, sorry. If you can't pay your supplier, what do you do? It's easier to get on the phone and have a 1 minute conversation, go, hey, the cash flow is not here this week. You're the first one on top of the list. I'll pay you next week. And if that's not good, I can pay you 10, 20% now, and then I'll pay you the remainder next week. And instead of putting your head in the sand and waiting for all these phone calls coming in going, where's my money? Where's my money? They're going to come. And then you live in that part of fear and scared, like you're scared of the next time your phone rings. When your phone rings, it should be a positive thing because you want an inquiry. Yep. You don't want the phone ringing and going, hey, where's my money? You want the phone ringing and going, hey, do you provide this product?
Yep.
Yeah. So
100%. That's been a number one business negotiation tool and skill that I've learned that, we talked about, is always be proactive, always be on the front foot. And even if it's you get an unexpected bill that shows up, is just get on there and renegotiate. If you own property in this state or in this country, as we do in Australia here, and you get a massive land tax bill or a property bill, you can get into an agreement to pay that off gradually. You don't have to do it all in one. It's all about being proactive and taking responsibility and dictating the terms. And worst thing is they can say no, in which case you go, okay, dude, you can say no, but what other option do I have?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm trying to be proactive and find a solution. And more often than not, people will work with you and then you honor it. And then they go, okay, you're trustworthy, which is one of the topics we talked about recently. So you've now established trust. And so if you ever own that same scenario again, you leverage off that trust and they go, sure, that's right. You did it last time. We trust you, of course.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is just having that conversation and being open. You build the trust, and we talked about establishing trust and maintaining it. Is, communication is amazing, and there's very little a lot of the time. And I think that goes back to what you like to talk about as being vulnerable.
Yep.
Some people don't want to admit, hey, my cash flow is not here. Everyone wants to have their good, strong business, but sometimes we don't have the cash flow, and you go, hey, it's not here this week, but it'll be here next week. Yep. Can you wait? And I tell you this, people would rather get paid a little now to get their whole amount later than not to get paid at all and have to wait the extra 2 or 3 weeks before they get paid. They'd rather have that 10, 20% now, or set up a payment plan of, hey, 10 weeks of 10% or whatever it is. They rather that than not being paid at all.
Yeah, 100%. 100% you're going to get that.
That's it, yeah.
It's an automatic response of mine, 100%, but that's exactly what you'll get, is if you work out how to structure communication. But first and foremost, you can't put your head in the sand.
Yeah, don't run away from it.
And that goes against all instincts, all survival instincts for a lot of people. And yet once they can overcome that, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
All right, so They're point 3. This is probably the one that you thought. Point number 4 is where you talked about the beers. I said, no, I didn't say anything about alcohol. So, but we've got it under unhealthy lifestyle choices, right? So whatever that is for you, whatever that is. So if you are going to do great things, you need to be at your best. Simple. Whatever that is, and it's important to do an audit on what allows you to thrive and function at your best. So the easy ones we look at are sleep, nutrition, exercise, right? So they're important lifestyle habits. You can't consistently make requests of yourself without putting the appropriate input into it. And so you will find that people will get to a point where they can get away with stuff up until the point where they can't. And maybe because, I've gotten to the point where I can't get away with shit. If I'm not sleeping, if I'm not eating well, it shows in my performance.
Yeah.
So consequently for me, for a lot of people who want to do great things and demand high things from themselves, they need to nurture themselves, and making some good lifestyle choices is a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree with this. And I'm always one of the, I find this with me specifically, but I look like how I feel mentally, right? And that means that if I'm eating poorly mentally, I'm not there.
Yep.
And then it reflects in my body. So
I think a lot of people are like that too, Adam. Yeah.
I don't like to judge people, but that's generally how when I see someone, I'm like, you look like how you feel mentally, because you can see the difference. And this is why I like doing, when I'm talking about business, I mean business partnering or something, or product partnering. I like to do that with someone who has an emphasis on exercise, because I go, well, you've got that discipline in one aspect of your life. It doesn't matter what exercise. It could be yoga, it could be Tai Chi, it could be martial arts, could be weightlifting, could be swimming, could be running, whatever it is. It just shows that you've got an active mind. You're not going to put your head in the sand. You're not going to just wait for something to happen. And I know it sounds a little judgy, but they're my prerequisites for going, hey, I want to do business with you because I can trust you on this level, this level, and this level. And that if I do need to take a half an hour off early because I need to get my run in before my triathlon, hey, you're going to understand that as well. And yeah, so the unhealthy lifestyle, I've been there. I can be there right now. I can not. It depends what's happening in my life. And that's an excuse.
Yeah, look, like I said to you, remember how I said right at the start, this is going to be the part that you butt up against, and it's going to be different things for different people, right? So like I said, I'm going through these, and there'll be parts that I just go, yep, that's where I have had to put my focus, and I need to keep putting my focus on. But for most people, that's going to be the Achilles heel. That's the part that lets them down, and this is like there's no charger on these. These are like this is a 2-dimensional. We've got some points that we're outlining, but there's no emotion in it.
Yeah.
But the moment you're confronted with it and you really look at that, you go, oh, holy smoke, this is why I'm not able to do what I'm doing, and what do I do about that? And like I said to you, I mentioned about the emotional regulation. That was a big one for me specifically. If you've identified that unhealthy, look, and we like a lot of us have been down that road.
Yeah.
And but it's a fact that you know when I was growing up, computer speak used to be GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
And whatever, and a big part of that is going to be your health and lifestyle choices. So whatever that looks like for people. So how about we leave it at that one, because that becomes then like it's not a beat up stuff, but I can just say, even just looking at you go, okay, man, there's something that's, like it's hit you between the eyes, and you've suddenly gone, okay, all right, okay. And this is because we're living this process as well. We're sharing it, we're communicating through our experiences. But for people who aren't seeing this live, something with looking at him, he's just suddenly going, you know what? Yeah, there's something in that for me.
It's just one of those things that with exercise, I always want to do more. And I joke around, I'm just doing the short length triathlons, but at the end of the season, I'm going to that next level. And then next season, they only run in this series, they run 3 Olympics out of 5 series. So I'm like, I'll do 3 Olympics, and then the other ones I'll do the shorter distances. And then And then I'm like, but what's stopping me from going to the half Ironman?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's stopping me from going to the next? So even though I'm doing activities and I'm very active in my life, I want to do more.
Yeah.
And that's me just never being satisfied in that sort of, I want to be able to go, hey, I've run the Melbourne Marathon. I've done an Ironman. I've done a half Ironman. I've done the cycle around the bay that's 300 Ks in a day or whatever it is. I want to have all those titles. So when I look at this sleep, nutrition, exercise, it's not necessarily that I'm lacking at the moment. It's like, what else can I do?
Yeah.
And I just want to upskill the whole way.
Great.
So that's what the wheels are ticking in my mind.
Yeah.
It's like, I always want more in that field.
Yeah, and that for a lot of people, that's going to be the difference that makes a difference, right? So let's do a quick recap. Point number 1 of some things that may need to let go of if you want to go up is certainty. Number 2 is ignoring your emotions. Number 3 is hiding your head in the sand. Number 4, which is the unhealthy lifestyle choices, which you just spoke about. So point number 5 is the victim mentality. And this is going to be a potentially challenging one for people because, you know, a lot of your backstory may have caused you a lot of pain and discomfort, may have been the compelling drive for reasons why you do what you do. Goodness, no, I'm going to put my hand on my heart and say, look, this has been my one. And not so much a victim, but just rather, hey, man, you don't know what I went through. And so that story fueled and got energy and effort. And so that was really helpful when it was Jim against the world. Up until the point where I went, you can't keep playing this story through your mind. You've got to let go of it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're still the victim in the story. Not from a powerlessness point of view, but it's you're kind of like, no, see, this is why I do what I do. And it's a justification. So for a lot of people, the victim mentality is a massive one. It just because you had a set of experiences and process, identity, et cetera, in the past doesn't mean that's the future. You get to determine your future. And part of that is quite often letting go of backstories, letting go of judgments of self, letting go of the victim part of you that keeps you stuck in that area. And there's something incredibly liberating and empowering in letting go that powerlessness and taking that power back that actually allows you to move forward. You give that up, you can definitely go up.
And that's what we mentioned in one of the previous podcasts about trust and how saying these social media influencers or people who want to be these motivational speakers, they always hit back on this tough time in their life. And I know they want to humanize themselves, but if it's in every single post and you're really going for that sympathy vote and going, hey, this guy really came from nothing, you know, I feel sorry, I'm going to give him a like, or I'm going to give her a like for dealing with this. I don't find that to be productive. I don't think that you can go to a certain point living in that mentality, but you can't go further. And this podcast, the whole series is about going further, increasing your scope, increasing your tool belt, and just moving forward in life. And if you're constantly looking at the victim mentality in the rear view mirror, you can't look forward. The windshield's a lot bigger than the rear view mirror. So you've always got to look forward. And yes, we've all had pain in our past. Some have had more. I'm not going to deny it.
Yeah.
But until you accept it, process it, and release it, you won't be able to go forward, because then again, it comes back to point number 2, where you're ignoring your emotions. If you're holding on to a victim mentality, your body is going into this pain and this fear and anger with what has happened, and you can't free yourself to be able to move forward.
Yep. And Adam, that's a really important component there, because when you're stuck in the victim mentality, it's part of what's called the drama triangle. You're stuck in the drama triangle, and as a victim, you're always looking for a rescuer. You're looking for someone to save you, and there's a powerlessness that comes from that. Joseph Campbell talks about this in The Hero's Journey, and he talks a lot about this in all themes and great stories of triumph. Whenever there's a victim, there always has to be a rescuer. And so when you're in victim mode, you are not in control of your situation and your life. And it's very hard to keep progressing, going up, moving forward, whatever that looks like, you know, when you're stuck in that victim mentality.
Yeah. And again, as Jim mentioned earlier, we're not saying this to be emotionally confronting for you. We're saying it to be nice. Like, You know, try not to live in the pain or in that victim mentality. We're trying to be open. We're not judging anyone. A lot of people have had tough lives. We're not judging you for that. We're just saying you've got to learn how to overcome it and just release that. And sometimes it's easier than others, but once you've liberated that fear and that pain, then, or sorry, not liberated, eradicated it, you'll be able to open yourself up for more emotions, which will lead you to a more positive life.
Yeah. And people may need some guidance there, some support specifically to work through that. An important, a lot of people who I have worked with, who I have monitored the journey of their story, have had some pretty horrific things that they've lived through, and they quite understandably carry quite a bit of hurt and wound around that. But the ones that have been able to move forward are the ones who've been able to get to a point of appreciation, not necessarily gratitude, but appreciation for who they become and what lessons they took out of that allowed them to move forward. So if they're looking at saying, I'm not grateful for what happened, what I can do is I can appreciate what I learned, and I can appreciate how I as a human have evolved, having gone through that, knowing that I'm going to take that experience and turn it around and make it a positive force for the world. So that's the way that they can use it in order to channel themselves forward without holding the backstory and the charge and the emotion of the wounding and the victim mentality.
Yeah, and again, we spoke about Eric. I spoke about Eric Thomas earlier, and he talks about how he was homeless at 14, 15, and he never really knew his real dad, and he was taking this hate and anger, and that led him to homelessness. Then one day he flipped, and he goes, "No, I can't do this. I can't live my life like this." And he changed his mentality. And then one of the things was later in life, he invited his dad to one of his speeches, and his dad came and he goes, "I'm sorry, I forgive you." And he just let all that pain out. And he goes, from that day forward, my life just became so much better. And he goes, "I'm not apologizing or forgiving you for you. I'm doing it for me."
100%.
100%. It was selfish.
Yeah.
He needed to look after himself though. But he was in that mindset that he realized, you know what? I can't let that be my story anymore. My dad wasn't there. Who cares? Yeah. I've built my life. I was on the streets. Who cares? I built my life now.
Yeah.
And you move forward because you're like, it happened. Yeah. It made me stronger.
It's a concept called the chain slave. Effectively, it's like a ball and chain where you carry that with you everywhere you go. And unless you can get to the point where you can disengage it and let it go, it will always follow you. Yeah. And this is the whole process of that. So that was a good distinction with Eric Thomas there as well too. So point number 6 now, Adam, in terms of things that you may need to let go of in order to go up, is excuses. Now, excuses, there can be legitimate reasons why things happen, but this is about being honest with yourself. This is getting to core truths. This is getting to understanding, taking responsibility of what it is that's coming up for you, and whether you're opting out, whether you're dogging it because of either a fear. There could be something that you don't feel that you're good enough to do it. So you'll come up with sabotaging behaviors, sabotaging reasons or excuses that will justify why you can't get to that place. So excuses are interestingly quite insidious. They can be just really subtle ones, or they can be just downright massive excuses. Oh, look, I'm female, I'm male, I'm a migrant. And sure, there may be challenges with that, but people, if they link that back up to our previous point about the victim mentality and marry those two of them up together, they quite often come up with a whole box of limits that they're setting up for themselves and preventing them from moving forward.
Yeah, and again, excuses sound best to the ones who make them. So if you go, "Oh, I'm a bit too tired today to go work out," well, in the end, if you put on a kilo or two, whose fault is that? It's only yours because you were a bit too tired. But how many times have you ever gone to the gym being exhausted, and then you've done 45 minutes, you've done half an hour, you've done 20 minutes even, like on a small workout because you're that tired. But after the 20 minutes, you come back and you go, "Hey, I was happy I just did that 20 minutes. Yeah. It didn't need to be that full hour." You've got to learn how to just move past that excuse that you're tired or not today, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll catch up. I'll do a double workout tomorrow and all this stuff. And it never really happens. You start telling yourself a story that's not there, and you start believing that story. And excuses, it's a very short road to going downwards.
Well, it is, there's two parts of it. There's having self awareness and having self trust and being honest with self is one level. A lot of people can't get to that place. It does take someone who's skillfully, as skillfully as a surgeon, to cut through a whole lot of the layers of excuse to get to core truth. And it's like, okay, I get why you're not making those calls. I get why you're not really going for it. I get it. But what's this really about? Is this really about all the things that you've said to me, or is it really about that you don't know that you can do this?
Yeah.
Or you don't believe that this is possible for you? Because once we can get to that point and address that thing, suddenly the excuses go away. The excuses are convenient ways of placating ourselves to be able to hide from what's really the cause of why you're not taking action, why not you're moving up, and why you're not taking progression in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, and I'll use the example of me at work at the moment. I have from Monday to Friday, from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., our oven is full. I don't have any other time or any other space to grow my business unless I move into penalty rate hours and 24-hour business, which I don't want to do, or weekend, and I don't want to do that either. So right now, I'm sitting in a point where I can't produce more. But what am I doing about it? That is my reality, but that's not my excuse. I'm now moving to a bigger site, and that should happen by March, which allows me to have 4 ovens plus my 2 ovens at the moment. So that's 6 ovens. That means my scope to grow is going to be massive. Right now, my reality is not my excuse. My reality is my reality. But I'm combating that with growing the business. And it's easy for me, once I get to the new site, to go, hey, actually, we don't have the capacity. That then becomes an excuse. If that becomes a habit, my business is going to fall quite quickly. So you can't allow your reality to continue becoming your excuse. So if you scale up, don't use your old reality as an excuse.
Yeah, you've got to upgrade your identity, yourself, and the expectations that you have of self. But a lot of the times, excuses are one of the biggest reasons that hold people back from going anywhere.
Yeah.
Whether it's on a personal level, whether it's on a health level, whether it's on a business level, whatever. And it usually is dressed up as a reason, when in actual fact there's usually a fear or uncertainty that's coming with that as well.
Yeah, and I could sit here and go, hey, you know what? I don't want to move my factory because it's comfortable where I'm at. I've got it set up. The rent's good. I don't need to do anything. But then I won't grow. There's no ability for me to grow in that building. And I could use it as an excuse forever and just be comfortable and just go, hey, I'm happy doing what we do. But that's not in my bones, my blood.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. On this list, there's things, as Jim said, there's things that butt up against us. And I don't do everything at 100% on this list. I'm not on my high horse. I'm not on a pedestal. I don't do everything here. But I know what needs to be done. And that's why I'll push this. And I'm my own harshest critic, I'll tell you that. So I work on this more than what you think I would work on this. I'm not sitting this from a position of power going, this is what I do every day. And I've got no excuses ever. And I don't have any distractions ever. And I don't live in the victim mentality. And my emotional intelligence is not, it is always at 100% because it's not. There's always doubt and learning, and that's how we grow.
Yeah. So
distractions.
We're going to put, point number 7 now is distractions. And this is a really important thing. There's a law called Parkinson's law, which basically says that if you don't fill your time up with high priority things, they're going to be taken up by low priority things. And so a lot of those low priority things quite often are distractions.
Yeah.
And distractions shift your energy from what it really is that you should be doing. But interestingly, distractions quite often are convenient, particularly if you're and this is going to take us back to the feelings of emotional regulation. So if you haven't found a way to emotionally regulate, and if you're sitting in boredom, if you're sitting in challenge or fear, and you don't want to fess up to those feelings, you're going to look for a distraction, something that will just take that pain or that awkward feeling to go away. And really, it's another thing that I've noticed is that the number of distractions that people look for drop radically the moment they lean into the unpleasant feelings.
Yeah.
And so consequently, they can stay in those feelings, cycle through them and be a lot more productive. But the people who are looking for distractions consistently, either, number one, they're not on purpose, because someone who's on purpose gets up early, stays up late, and dedicates every spare moment to that purpose. So that's it. Number two, people who aren't in alignment with their values, and aren't really expressing life on their terms, are usually people who are distracted. So they're kind of going, this isn't fulfilling me, so what can I look for? It's kind of like the junk food in terms of our activities, because we're looking for the quick fix or the quick out to satisfy something that really we want to be able to address as well. So distractions are things that are really important. And if you find that you are consistently stuck in that mode, it's about building systems and what we call pre-commitments, or things that you do in advance to stop you from getting in your own way.
Yeah. And I've been toying with this for about a week or two, and I definitely want to delete all social medias. I'll delete TikTok today in front of you.
That's massive,
just
man.
so you know. No, because
massive.
because the distractions are just too much. Like, and I've identified that, and it's funny that it's on the list, because it's something that I've identified with, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
It's just a waste of time. And I've noticed I never use Facebook. Only reason I got Facebook back, I deleted it last January. Only reason I got it back was for the podcast. So I'll delete the app from my phone, and when I need to post, I'll just post on the desktop. Instagram, I've got a software that I can post on that I don't need the app. And TikTok, I'll just get rid of. And I'll only have the social media just to do the podcast stuff. And apart from that, I don't really want it anymore. It's not serving me in the right way. And, the hour or two that I spend on social media, which is probably more than that, to be honest, but I could be reading a book. I could be exercising more. I could be looking at business directions. I could be enhancing my life, not being distracted with other people's lives.
Yeah. So things like, boredom, when things like doubt, things like not, uncertain, all those kind of things, they're the triggers for looking for distractions. And then our phone are the simplest forms of our go-to. You're in a line waiting, not that anybody goes to the post office anymore, right? But if you're in a line, you're waiting for someone. If you go and order food and you're waiting for it, it might be 25 seconds that you're waiting, and yet now all of us, me included, we all go straight to our phones.
Yeah.
Right. None of us sit in that feeling anymore, and so consequently, they're distractions. And so you could say that that's an efficient use of that time. However, if you're going to your phone 50 times a day when you're in work mode, you're distracted.
Yeah.
You're not actually putting all your energy and effort. And if you think about the impact that you could be having in that work role in your business, that you're robbing yourself off by deviating your attention from that, that's what's holding you back.
Yeah, and I identified that this week. I was like, on Thursday and Friday, I was really not productive at work, and I was working longer hours because my dad wasn't there to do a lot of the work that we do. So I was taking on his full workload plus my full workload, and then in the end, it was just too much. So I sat down and watched Netflix and watched a movie on there, Jungle. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Daniel Radcliffe, Australian movie, based on a true story. Great movie. It's about these guys in the 70s or 80s, early 80s, I think it was, that get lost in the Amazon or something. Great movie if you ever want to watch something as a distraction for you. But I identified that I was getting distracted during my work hours, and I go, this is not good.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to get rid of that. And, we've got the podcast, so we need to promote it. But at the same time, I'm deleting the apps off both my phones. I'll keep my accounts for the moment, but I just won't access them.
Adam, the one of the biggest things that I found that helps that a lot is scheduling things to certain time frames. So a lot of times people will get on the net and start surfing, and 3 hours later, after they've gone down the rabbit hole, they go, where did that time go? But if you allocate blocks of time, so if you're doing something and a thought comes to you, you jot that down, and you might have research time or social media time for some. You're getting off there, that's cool. But you might go, okay, I'm going to allocate my time, and that's the time you go and do it. You put it in that particular box of time that you do stuff, and consequently, you've got that allocated. And as long as you stay within those components, you get all parts of it done. It's the problem is when one merges into the other, and where you should be in productive work mode, you're, as I said, finding something that's going away. And in your case, it could be a whole lot of reasons. Number one is that you just cooked and you're tired and you got exhausted, and you just go, man, I need this out. So that's more like a symptom of, hey, I went too hard. But if you're finding that it's happening consistently, there's a bigger issue that's at play here. And
that's coming from our topic of burning out. And that's where I identified that I'm doing too much. So then to counteract it, I went the complete opposite. It's like, while I'm at work, I'm going to watch a movie because I'm just so far away from, I can see that I'm going to burn out. So it's like, I've got to relax now. Yeah. And what relaxing for me is, I'm just going to chuck on a movie. Yeah. And I'm fortunate because I'm the boss and I can do that sort of stuff. If I'm down on the production floor, I don't always have that out. And then that keeps grinding your gears and keeps grinding. And eventually you do lead to burnout. So I identified it. It's just I went too far. I went so counterproductive that it was a waste of 2 days. And then people go, why aren't you why aren't I reaching success? It's like, because you wasted 2 out of 5 days at work this week. Yeah. And I identify that, and now clear it all.
Yep. Okay, cool. Like I said, this is people thinking we're recording this for them, but obviously
therapeutic.
It's therapeutic just working through that for the hosts as well. That's for sure.
Actually, I'll show you a TikTok video afterwards.
Before you delete it, okay.
No, it was about Elon Musk's work schedule, and he is one of the busiest people in the world. But he does exactly what you said, and it's just doing it to times. Yep. This is the time I do this. This is the time. These are the top 3 critical things I need to do. And he identifies a lot of things. And he writes it all down in the morning or the night before, and that's it. It gets done. What's scheduled gets done.
Yeah, so important. So point number 8, in terms of what you may need to give up in order to go up, is the need to be liked. Not everybody, let's face it, not everybody's going to like you. That's a reality. You can't please people all the time. If you are affected by the disease to please everybody, you're constantly focusing on that process as opposed to actually your core truth and what it is that you need to be focusing on. So I think a lot of great leaders get to the point where they get clear on who they are, what they stand for, and they communicate their own truth in that way, knowing that not everybody's going to like them. Not everybody's going to like what they say. In actual fact, people may go out of their way to undermine or sabotage what it is that you say. But unless you get clear on that and get clear on the fact that there is going to be resistance about who you are just by virtue of you being you, and you can be okay with that, you're always going to be looking for approval from everybody else.
Yeah, this is one that I don't need help with.
Yeah, you're okay with that?
I'm not necessarily an asshole, but I'm definitely not worried about what people think. And it's always funny when you go into a room and the first time you meet a whole bunch of people and you're just you and you're just having fun, you're talking, and then you leave, and then someone who's your friend goes, "Hey, they really love you." It's like, oh, that's nice. It's nice to hear. It's not what defines me though. I don't, people can like me, that's fine. But I know there's a lot of people who don't like me. And that's whether or not it's through jealousy, or if I've wronged them, or I did something when I was young that I, affected them, and they still hold that grudge. There's people out there like that, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be crippled by people who don't like me. I just keep living my life congruent with my values, and that's all I can do.
Yeah. And so, I'll give you an example, Adam. You've mentioned several times during our podcast, right? You've made a health choice and a lifestyle choice to go down the vegan path, right? So just by virtue of you making that decision, there's a whole subgroup of people who are going to dislike who you are and what you stand for just for that choice, right? And there's going to be a whole section of people who are going to go, brother, you're exactly kind of person that I want to hang around with.
Yeah.
And who's right and who's wrong, right? But you've made a decision that resonates well with you, and you've made some decisions that are going to help you move up.
Yeah.
And in the process, you've either pushed away or attracted different subgroups. And here's the lesson for it. That's always going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to keep both of those groups happy, what are you going to be? You're going to be a vanilla version and a watered down version of your true self, and actually not really showing anybody who you are.
Yeah, not being your true self. Yeah.
And so that's the danger. That's why it's called the disease to please.
Yeah.
You're always trying to please everybody. In the end, you're not basically being honest with yourself.
Well, that's one of these things, like I really, now that I've sort of toyed with the idea, I want to do at least a half Ironman. And I think when we talk to Sal Frisella, he's done the half Ironman, and he goes, it's one of the best experiences, but you have to be so selfish to get there. And you've got to worry about, blowing off dinners or going out for drinks with people, because you don't want to, again, your nutrition and how you look after your body. Every meal becomes critical when you're leading up to a race where you're swimming a mile, and then you're cycling, I think it's 60 miles, and running 13 miles. Like it's a big distance. Every meal counts, and you've got to become selfish in that point. So you've got to go, hey, I want to do this half Ironman, or I want to do this Ironman, and that's what's going to fill my cup. You're going to piss off some people, but it's what your priority is for your life. And you ideally don't want to piss anyone off. You can be as transparent as possible. Go, hey, I'm really training for this goal, and I can't go out for drinks. We want to catch up for a coffee or something, and try and change it around. Not neglect people, but just live it on your terms.
Yeah, there's a difference between being an agitator and going out looking for that, and there's a difference between you just being you and being all of you, and that is creating a reaction in somebody else. So I think that's one of the biggest things that stops people from fulfilling their ideal and their true essence and true life, is that they're constantly worrying about what everybody else will think, what everybody else will think of them, and needing to be liked in order to give it validation that they're on the right path. And I think the growth work that people do on themselves just get to point. Some people can go, I don't care what everybody says, and that's one strategy. But you're going to push a lot of great people away from your life as well too. It's about just going, hey, you know what? Here's who I am. I'm comfortable with that. That's not always going to make people happy, but I'm okay.
Yeah, and you mentioned it before. My diet is quite restrictive, and a lot of people don't understand it. But then at the same time, when I do 75 hard and I'm not drinking, and people invite me out to dinners, and they're like, well, you're a vegan and you don't drink. What fun is it going out with you? I was like, well, I'm not really doing this to be fun for you. I'm doing this because I find that it works best for my body.
Yeah.
And I know being off alcohol was so good for me, and my mental strength and my output. It's almost freeing not drinking alcohol. But then you almost isolate yourself, and you're not that social person. You don't eat this, you don't drink that. Why? It's really boring being around you. And I guess it is what it is, and I'm happy with myself. And but I don't want to burn the bridges. That's the other issue. So every so often you grab that glass of wine or that beer just to be part of that social aspect. But you got to be true to yourself as well.
Yeah, that's a really important one for a lot of people, is the need to be liked. Point number 9 of things that you may need to give up in order to go up, and that is control. And by control, I mean micromanaging everything. I mean surrendering to the fact that there may be things that you have to let go of, or you have to trust others to run in order for you to move up. So you can't consistently run at 150% of your capacity because you're running around doing all components. Finding a way that you can delegate, you can trust, you can say, okay, this is in your hands, will empower people around you, but then also create the freedom for you to be able to leverage your time, effort, energy as well. So this is a really important one where great systems are at the essence, because it's really difficult to grow unless you are able to overcome this step.
Yeah, and this week was a perfect example at work. Normally, when we've got the film running through the machine does what the machine does, and that's it. It's plain and simple. A machine does what it's programmed to do. What stuffs up is how we put the film on the machine. Sometimes it's too tight with the tension, sometimes it's too loose, sometimes it's not centered, and that's what stuffs the machine around. The machine knows one job, but it's the user error. I always say it's user error. So then when I come down to fix the machine, it's me fixing the film on the machine. I'm not doing anything to the actual mechanics. I'm just tightening or loosening. So then my staff this week, when I wasn't on the production floor and my dad wasn't there, they're like, "Oh, can you teach us how to?" And then that just meant that I've just let control go to my staff. They want it, and I'm happy to give it to them. And she goes, when the packaging sticks together, what do you do? Do you tighten it or loosen it? And I said, well, let's try it. We tightened it and it didn't work. So we loosened it and it worked. And I go, well, that's it. But now she has the control to go, hey, next time it's sticking, all I need to do is loosen it a little bit or tighten it a little bit. And that was me relieving that stress from myself. I can always come down and help, but now they know what they're doing.
So putting it in that context, every one time that you don't have to come down to troubleshoot that scenario is one more time that you can dedicate to what is in your wheelhouse that will allow you to grow your business, right? So this is the whole process of it. If every time someone says, "Hey, I've got a problem," you go, "Hey, I'll fix it. I'll fix it. I'll fix it." You basically are just running around doing all these little tasks that may not be the highest and best use of your time. And because you haven't had efficient systems to be able to train people on it, you're stuck in that process. So there's a level of detachment and delegation that has to happen for you to be able to progress and move forward.
Yeah, definitely.
And so Adam, point number 10, our final point of things that you may need to give up in order to go up is internal resistance. And internal resistance, what we mean by that is all the fears, the doubts, the negative self-talk that come up for all of us any time that we are going to do anything. It's you can't do that, or why would you want to do this, or what will people think, all that kind of thing. That it's that process of working through that, the resistance that builds up in all of us, the inertia that we have to overcome for us to do anything. So any time that you will decide to make a big decision or make a change, immediately situations will come up against you to test that resolve. That's what the internal resistance is all about. And it's an important way of working through that in order to let that, to keep progressing.
Yeah, and human beings are creatures of comfort, and we like being comfortable. I think most animals are like that. Most species like to be comfortable. Not many like to be in that flight or fight situation. And a lot of people are more fearful of being successful than not being successful. Because if you become successful, you're moving out of your comfort zone there. You might be earning more money than all the people around you. So then you've got to change the way you live your life. And then you might feel guilty because you're making more money than other people, even though you've put more work in. And then internally you start thinking, do I really want to be that successful? Because then I'm losing all my friends from this, or people don't want to hang around me. And it happens when I move up in life. Sometimes people put me on this pedestal and they're like, oh, you're too busy for us. So I'm like, no, I own a business and I manage my time that I can still come for beers and drinks and dinners. They're like, but you're the busy one. I'm like, no, you're more busy than I am. But that's because I try and alleviate as many distractions or as many time restraints. And as you said, if it gets scheduled, it gets done. If I schedule a catch up, we're going to catch up. I'm not the busy one. You guys are. And a lot of people don't want to be in that situation. So they go, hey, actually, I'll just be comfortable. I don't need to move up. I'll just leave all my time available for everyone. And you just try to alleviate that internal resistance. You just say, oh, you know what? Don't worry about it. I don't need to be successful today. I'm happy just how it is, because then I can catch up with my friends anytime I want. I don't feel guilty for being more successful. I don't feel guilty for being in a different lifestyle now than my friends were before. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that I used to deal with, the resistance, but now it's just I'm going to live my life and be successful and still have time for everyone else, but try and stop all those doubts and fears and worrying that people are going to leave my life because I've changed and become more successful.
So I think that's the key thing to take out of that is internal resistance is normal, natural, and necessary, because the resistance is going to show up to you, and it's about overcoming those resistances, whether they're perceived or real, that will allow you to grow into the person who you need to be in order to go up. And that's really the case in this. So expect that even as opportunities show up, there will always be a resistance that presents itself to really test the resolve of the situation. So Adam, we've gone through 10 steps, and there's some big ones. And obviously, even just in the discussion with you, it hits the mark for all of us. That's why the reason why we drafted these up in this way, as means of saying these are the areas to consistently keep working on in order to keep progressing both personally and professionally and in your business, to let go of things that don't serve you in order to move forward. Now, if people are going to leverage what we've talked about today, there's some specific action steps that they could take to support them. Two specifically. Number one is to review the 10 points that we've covered and identify if there are any specific areas that you may need to let go of, or things that you may need to let go of in order to go up. Now, we've both identified several within ourselves to go, okay, this is what I've worked on, this is what I'm working on. So do the same. Just go through that list and go, okay, here's something that I could put my focus and energy on, is this. And once you've identified that, number two, identify some action steps that you can work on within that area that will assist you to commit to doing this. So Adam mentioned about distractions. His action steps are great. I'm getting off socials and I'm getting off TikTok, right? So they are specific action steps and pre-commitments that he is making in order to focus on that. So that's pretty much how to go about that in that context. Any final words from you, Adam, before we finish up?
When you're going through this list, don't go through this list in the story that you tell yourself. Be as open and transparent as possible, and don't joke and don't kid yourself. Don't go, hey, I don't actually spend that much time on social media. No, you can check your screen time on your phone.
That's pretty confronting,
Yeah.
that one, isn't it? When
Yeah.
you go, gee, I am spending a bit of time there.
Yeah, I think mine was like 25 hours on my phone last week. That's a fair bit of time on your phone. There's a lot more things in life than just sitting on your phone. And that was what did it for me. It was like 1 week when I was in Apollo Bay, almost spent no time on my phone. The next week when I came back, it was 32 hours. Then last week it was 25 hours. And I'm just going, that's not serving me. That's 25 hours that I don't get back. That's a full day that I've lost this week from just sitting on my phone. I go, it's not right. It's But do that in all aspects of this. Don't, like the distractions is easy because that was only on my phone. Then there's the movies that I watched. Then there's the time on the web that I was wasting. All up, I could have lost 2 or 3 days this week from just all these distractions. Is that best serving me? And that's where you have to be transparent and honest and open and go, hey, you know what? Something's not right here. And that's how you counteract it. Not going, hey, I work really hard, so I need that movie. Yeah, well, you're probably getting distracted too often, and that's why you feel you're working too hard, because you don't have enough hours in the day now. So then you need that movie, and that becomes another distraction as well. So just be open and honest. Don't assess this list based on the stories that you tell yourself, based it on the truth. And it's easy when you can track it, like with screen time.
Yeah, no, good distinction. So thank you, Adam, for that. And thank you to everybody for once again joining us on the podcast. This is just a reminder that you can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and the extended Launch and Beyond community on all these channels. If you've got any questions or comments you have about the podcast or anything you'd like some support with, please reach out. Many times your thoughts and questions are the same ones that other people have, but they just haven't come forward to share with them. So this dialogue that you're creating by virtue of your comments could be a great ripple effect that will help people even more than you possibly could realize. And finally, if you're enjoying the podcast and finding value in it, we'd be grateful if you go over to iTunes and leave us a review. That allows us to reach more people and have a bigger impact than we possibly could have. So thank you once again for joining us, and it's goodbye from me.
Thanks, guys. And just thanks for jumping on YouTube, because our numbers are starting to get a lot better on the video avenue. So we love that. Like and share it, and we'll keep producing as high quality as we can. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.